So, fellow GDMA members and guests, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Kevin Quigley.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thanks very much. So, pleasure to be here. Must be at L&I because it's the only place I've ever spoken where the computer and the visual machine has caution cones around it. So, I think we're safe. There are a lot of reasons why it's a pleasure to be here. I know at least 4 of you very well, and I know the great work you've done. And so the rest of you who I don't know, if you're colleagues with these fantastic people, it's truly impressive. So what I would say is, I want to be like you when I grow up. I also am glad to be here because I hear you pay dues to be a member and you pay for lunch. So in the miles between here and when I get home tonight at Lake Stevens, what I'm going to be saying to the kids is, yeah, I spoke to a group today who had to pay to listen to me. So thank you very much for that. I can't help it. I always think of this when I'm standing up here. So I asked my wife for advice, like it's a decade ago now, on speaking to a group I had to speak to, and my wife Suzanne, she says to me, well, you know, I think you need to either be funny or short. And then a couple minutes go by and she looks at me the way, you know, your spouse can look at you like she has something she doesn't want to tell you, and then she says to me, in your case, short. So I will definitely get you out on time. But I want to start with the question, which is where I always start with my own teammates, which is, did the governor really appoint a shipyard guy to run DSHS? Because that was my last job. And it's not exactly your standard transition. You're building ships and working with Boilermakers one day, and the next day running the state's largest agency. And what I found is there's no good answer to this question. And I've tried a lot, but the one I always try every time is I say to people, well, yeah, it's true, I run a shipyard, but before that I ran global business development for Bill Gates' Craig McCaw satellite company, and then I ran an internet company that was sold to Overstock.com. I was in the state senate. I have law degrees from NYU and Harvard. And then the audience is going, oh my God, this guy can't even hold a job. So you're stuck with me, but not half as much as my team stuck with me. So here's where I want to start. Anybody know what this is? Who answered that? Well done, well done. So this is from the movie The Matrix. It is, so can you tell me your name?
Dork also.
Dork, can you tell people kind of what this is a picture of?
So it's a picture of, in essence, code for an artificial world where people, you know, they're asleep, but kind of almost dreaming, live in that world.
So that's, and there's so much information that in the Matrix that even though these kind of rebel people are kind of tracking it, they can't even read it all, so they can just kind of see trends in it. This is kind of like running DSHS. It's so big and so vast that it can be hard to find your bearings. It can be hard to know exactly what road to go down, where to start to chase some problems. Believe me, on the weekends, there's a crisis every, one a day, and on the weekdays, probably one an hour. And I'm not even talking about me. I'm talking about the assistant secretaries who run the different organizations within DSHS, our different administrations. So my expectation of them is that they all operate like CEOs. And it's not because I have some grand view of leadership. It's because, frankly, I want to be hiking and be on vacation, and they got to be able to run the show so that I feel good about that. So in asking them to be CEOs, I created this thing called the CEO Matrix. Thank you very much. I called it that. And it has 5 elements. So these are the things that I tell my colleagues that in order to be a CEO, based on my experience, you really need to track and have a game plan on and pursue it at a specific level. And you can see it's safety, quality assurance, finance, strategic objectives, mission, and empowerment. So let's just do, let's hear people's thoughts of which one is the most important, do they think, to them, to their view of the world. Anybody want to throw out some ideas? Just popcorn it out. Anybody?
Mission and empowerment.
She cheats. She worked for me. Right, okay. Okay. Thank you, though. So, okay, you flunked that audience participation step. let's just go back to some like kind of boring PowerPoint slides. I'm going to go through the ones that we're not going to have time to discuss today. And I rank these in order. I'm not going to tell you which one's number 1 or number 3, but once you do number 1, the second thing is determining that your people are safe. And actually, I even kind of set up grades for the team, which is for safety, you have to do a job hazard assessment. If you didn't do that, you can't get a passing grade. You have to train people, even to get in C territory, although L&I might flunk you if you didn't train people. You have to have a real action plan for improvement, and then if you're actually making improvement. Because a lot of times with safety, people don't think of improving, like decreasing accidents overall. And in fact, in a lot of businesses, people don't even think of safety. You might think our CFO didn't have to think of safety, except for the fact that it turns out that the people who run the forklifts and do the repairs operate in her shop. So, and even if you think you have a shop that doesn't even have to think about safety, everybody has to think of evacuation plans, bloodborne pathogens, that kind of stuff. And because we have responsibility for these human beings as a CEO, that's why it's number 2 on my list. I'm blasting through these first ones. Finance is on the list, and I kind of have it broken down. You have to have quality reporting and projections to get a passing grade on this. You have to balance your budget. Now, normally you might say, well, whoa, if I don't balance my budget, I can still get a C. Well, or D even, and it's not a flunk. It's a little complicated in DSHS because we have a few departments where you're caught between the money the legislature gives you and your legal obligations to take care of people in residential rehabilitation centers or in hospitals. So I had to be fair to this team, and to a different team, if we were in a real business world, I think that might be a flunking grade. Then you have to be able to quantify what the different elements are of the services that you're providing. I mean, you have to go beyond what's it cost to run the whole hospital. You got to have some vision of what's it cost to run a bed, what's it cost to serve a client, that kind of thing. And then ultimately you have to work on follow the money and find the improvements. Then number 5 is quality assurance. This is probably the one that people pay the least attention to. And can you imagine, you're coming on as a new assistant secretary, you walk into, say, the middle of Economic Services Administration. 4,500 employees, $2 billion budget, 1.5 million clients. Things are going a million miles an hour. And you have to wonder, when was the last time someone stopped and made sure that from the regulations all the way to the service of the clients, that there's a procedure that tracks all the way through. I can tell you as an agency, we've had some radical failings, ones that we earned from the prior administration. And one big word you never want to learn what it means, called PASSAR 2. I guess only PASSAR is a word. In fact, neither of them are words. PASSAR stands for something else. But these were evaluations that we were supposed to do of our people with developmental disabilities in nursing homes. Nobody ever did them. On a good day, that's a $5 million fine, and could be worse if if Medicaid really wanted to get grumpy with us. So we see examples where the obligations that we have aren't tracked all the way back. And you can kind of imagine, you could step in as a CEO with a machine that's running thinking, well, surely it's running right, and it always feels like it's running right till you're going down the road and all of a sudden one of the wheels falls off. So what I'm saying to my CEOs, to my assistant secretaries is, I get you can't do this tomorrow, but you've got to start doing it today. You have to have a quality manager that reports to you. Now, you'll see I have this reference to ISO 9001 QA plan. ISO stands for International Standards Organization. It doesn't really have to be that. I put it on this matrix because in my dream world, everybody lives by a same parameters for how we do quality assurance, but really this is really not complicated. It means you have to have a written procedure for what you do and you have to follow it. It means that you have to have a part that measures your progress, and it means you have to have management buy-in. And there's some other elements, but it's actually quite general. You don't have to use this, but the next step down is important. That is, you can't just go, okay, I got a system, I got the procedure, how am I going to, you have to go to the next stage. Where am I having problems? Where can I identify improvements? And then do I actually make the improvements overall? So this is my fast forward version. Try to move out of the Twilight Zone, Matrix Zone with the normal PowerPoint slides. This is the part of the talk where I talk about what I'm not going to talk about. That was it. So now we've got 2 left. We have strategic objectives and mission and empowerment. I'm going to go to strategic objectives next. So there's a lot of people, I think, who would think that this is really number 1. That what's your strategy, what are your objectives, what are you trying to do? For me, that feels like so 1990. You have to do that. You have to understand where you're going. You have to measure. You have to monitor. But we used to think that was the be-all and end-all. And before we leave today, you'll see, at least for me, it's critically important, but it's not the most important. But since I want to brag about my agency, I want to show you some of the things that we're doing, and I'll also go through this relatively quickly. So what we tried to do in kind of a nifty color-coded way is identify from the client's perspective how's our performance doing. This is just one of our agencies. This is the Economic Service Administration. They're responsible for the community service offices. I think we have roughly 72 of them across the state. Like I say, they serve about 1.5 million customers. They have about 4,500 employees. The big thing is SNAP, or what we used to call food stamps, and TANF, which we used to call welfare. There's a number of other things like refugee assistance in there as well, aging, blind, and disabled programs, but most of it's TANF and SNAP. And again, this is just $2 billion of about a $14 billion agency. Or I go biennial by budget. This is the annual numbers. Annually, I think it's $1 billion. It's $1 billion. So now you could start with, okay, what are the metrics that we're measuring and monitoring? But that doesn't start with the client. So in this evaluation, we try to start with, what are we doing that's going to impact the client? So for example, in that agency, we need to provide flawless food assistance and flawless child support collection and work support services, which would be TANF, and disability supports. And then we proceeded to grade these. Now, here's the complication, especially at DSHS, and I'll be shocked if it's not true in your world. And that is, if you measure it from the client's perspective, let me give you the easiest example, developmental disabilities. We have 14,000 people with developmental disabilities who are eligible for services who don't get any services at all. We call it the no paid services caseload. So if you're a parent of one of those individuals or one of those individuals, doesn't matter how well we're doing, you're feeling that the system's in the red. The system is not functioning well because it's not serving you. And so that's why we call this Washington's commitment rather than the department's performance, because this is measured from the client's perspective. Now, you can see kind of how we've graded it, how we're doing overall. That's kind of at the highest level. Then at the next level, we drill down to what progress are we making within the agency against specific measures and markers. So how are we doing in increasing access to food assistance? What's our payment accuracy rate? How are we doing on our child support collections? How are we doing on TANF participants meeting the federal work participation rate, for example, something we focused on a lot. For each one of these metrics, there is a quantitative measure of success, and there is a quantitative measure of performance that we update every 90 days. We used to update our strategic plans every 90 days. Now what we're going to do is, starting this year, keep our strategic plans consistent for a year, but update our action plans every 90 days. And always every 90 days, update the measures of how we're doing. So this is also in the category of not really what I wanted to chat with you about, but I wanted to brag about the team. I do want to say one thing here, though. The biggest single challenge with this magnificent piece of work is making it real for the team. Too often when you have a strategic plan, it doesn't mean anything to anybody. In fact, brand new employee, last place they would ever look for direction is in the strategic plan. Are you kidding me? It becomes a compliance exercise. It's done because we know we're supposed to do it, and we put it on the shelf, and that's kind of the end of it. The biggest thing I pitch to my teammates is, you've got to make your strategic plan real. I've had, with some of my super talented teammates, I've had chats with them about their action plans, for example, and I'm like, well, this action plan says you're doing this, and that's not making progress. And I'll say, so, you know, how are you making progress? And they'll say, well, we're doing this and this and this and this. And you can start to see there's a disconnect between what they're saying and doing and what's in their strategic plan. And marrying those together is critical when it comes to making progress in your strategic objectives. It can't be a compliance exercise. This is really no good if just 10 of us within DSHS are looking at this and posting it on the web. It needs to drive action overall. This metric, actually, the phenomenal improvement you see here in a relatively short time, almost a doubling, saved us $52 million. When you don't meet the federal work participation rate, which is where we were when this governor first got here, the feds fine you. And the fines as of last year that we've avoided would have been $20 million, and as of this year, if we were going to be fined, we would have been up to $50 million. There's a nice little feature here, which is the old governor earned us a fine here. We got in compliance here, so then they waived the old fine, and of course, when you're in compliance, you don't get fined. So we got out from the $20 million between that one, and this year, of course, we're generally doing well. I say generally, we're doing fantastic, as it turns out, on our all-family rate. This one's a really hard one to hit. But this is an area where nothing made a bigger difference than clearly communicating to the team what the objective was. The team out there in all these different community service offices, they were ready to go. We just had to tell them this was a big priority. But I wouldn't pretend to you that we're as good at this everywhere. So one of the things I think you got to keep in mind is, or one of the things I believe we have to keep in mind is, we really got to over-communicate. We know this intuitively. You can't communicate with the team too many ways. So posters that identify what your strategic objectives are, meetings on your strategic objectives, any kind of multiple communication helps so people know this is really what we're focused on. You know, we always hear this, what we measure, we focus on. And so but we need to both measure it and call attention to it when you're an organization like DSHS, where we probably have 100 of these measures overall. So this is the more traditional piece, and as I say, I feel like in the old days people would say, you know, this is the key to management. This is the key, but I do not think it's the biggest key. And that, finally, 20 minutes into it, is what I want to talk to you about today. Or half of that. The real thing that produces great results is a focus on mission and empowerment. Now, since I burned 20 minutes, we're not even going to do the empowerment thing. We're going to just talk about the importance of mission. Anybody know who this guy is? Okay, who doesn't work at DSHS? So I'm telling you, if this guy's named Simon Sinek. He has a 20-minute TED Talk. I have it on your homework list at the end of this slide. It is really a great investment of your time. What he says essentially is the things that ties organizations together, the things that they have in common, whether they're Apple, or organizations or people, or Martin Luther King Jr., or the Wright brothers doing Powered Man Flight, is that they focus on why they're doing what they're doing, not what they're doing. When you focus on why, you tap into a power within people to get more excited, to get more invested overall. And in fact, what I found is this is in fact completely true. I have a couple of examples I use. One revolves around me, sorry about that. And that is, people used to say, well, what are you doing? And I'd say, well, the governor appointed me secretary of DSHS. And that's kind of cool. You know, you get to mention the governor's name, and people have their baggage about DSHS, but it's big, and they know that. But what I do more these days is I say, well, I'm in social services. And they're like, oh, yeah? So, yeah, it's great. You know, there's not a square inch of this state where if there's a child threatened with abuse, we're not there within 24 hours to do an initial face-to-face visit. I'm like, okay. And I just leave it there, and then they're like still, you know, wondering. So they'll ask, oh, yeah, so tell me more. It's like, well, you know, we provide housing to 50,000 seniors and people with traumatic brain injury every year and make sure that they have the care they need. And then I can see that in their eyes, they're really confused. What is this agency? And then to really freak them out, I say, yeah, we provide food assistance to 1.5 million people. And then they think I must run the Gates organization. And then the funny thing about it is, in 3 biennial budgets, we spend more than the entire endowment of the Gates organization. That's how impactful DSHS is. And then finally I say, yeah, Governor appointed me Secretary of DSHS. But I'll tell you what, it's great to see the connection in their eyes when they understand DSHS based on what we do rather than just the words, you know. But that's not my point. My point here is it's the feeling that it brings in me, how I feel about it when I get to describe what I do, what I'm part of, the power that exists when you do that. It's just absolutely amazing. Another example for you. I went around to my team for the combined fund drive. I think we visited 50 plus offices. And I'm trying to make this point to the team all the time that being in touch with why you do what you do is the most powerful thing we can focus on as managers and leaders. And as part of the combined fund drive, we had a great rally. You go to all these offices. They raised money. They did raffles. They did bake sales. People brought in lots and lots of food, and it's a chance to just say to them, look, think about today. Everybody's here feeling good, everybody's here smiling, and yet you're poorer, you have less time, you have less money because you gave food and time and so forth, and you feel better. Being in touch with why we do what we do and the power that's involved there means that even when we're giving more, we feel better. It's a wonderfully powerful tool, and here's the thing, lest you get confused, I'm not a social worker. I am formerly a money-grubbing business person. My last job, I worked with Boilermakers. This stuff is powerful and important because when you get there, I think you can quantify the increased result, and I think it's greater than 10%. If you both are in touch with mission and have a trusting, empowered organization where people feel seen and heard, the measure, I think, is on the magnitude of 10%, which is why I wanted this job so badly. Because I felt like if I could make my little contribution to improving the performance of DSHS on a magnitude of 10%, I mean, 10%, I have 17,500 teammates. That's like 1,750 extra teammates. You know, $13.5 billion budget. It's like $1.3 billion free money. 2.5 million clients. It's like being able to serve 250,000 more people. For me, I will never get a chance in life to have more of an impact on people than this opportunity that the governor has offered. And my point being, this is not about touchy-feely, how do we build a cool workforce. This is about how do we get better results from people. At one level, measuring objectives is certainly baseline and you've got to get there. But I think the great organizations are going to be deeply in touch with their values and have a real focus on how they empower people. So let me show you this slide. I make up that generally the people in this room, including me, are left-brain thinkers, even Linda, who thinks she's a right-brain thinker, but generally that we're dominated by the left side of our brain. We're organized, we're systematic, and so forth. And I don't know, it just looks like a bunch of hippies on the right side. Well, since we're left-brain thinkers, let's do this slide. So on the left brain, you know, it's that logic, it's that analysis, you know, understanding the spoken word with clarity. But the thing is, on the right brain, where there's creativity and imagination, there's also our visceral reactions, our non-language reactions. The fact is, when we engage the right side of the brain, we have an impact on people that's actually much deeper. It's more compelling. It's that visceral reaction that moves people forward. So if more people knew Simon, this was like double bonus star question here, which we're going to skip. But generally what it's about is the fact that, okay, so we've talked about being in touch with mission impacts you as the individual. But it's also critically important to bring other people on board, to bring other people on board your cause. And here I have an example as well. So, no surprise, who do I grovel to the most? The governor, my boss. So we had a chance to, as part of the Results Washington presentation, the Results Washington program, I suspect you all know about. It's our process to do lean across the state. We've identified certain markers that we want to achieve. This one was about self-sufficiency. So I had a chance to do a presentation to the governor about, frankly, we need more money to move people to self-sufficiency. We need to have more money for job training. We need to have more money to remove the barriers, chemical dependency or mental health issues that are in front of them. Sometimes we need more education. Sometimes we need more parenting skills. We need to invest more in these people. And I could have gone to the governor and said, you know, if you invest $2 million more, we can have a 10% increase in this number, or if you invest this $8 million, we'll have a 6% increase in this number. And you know, you got to believe if you're the governor, and actually if you're most anybody else, but particularly if you're the governor, you just hear that all day long. And even though, I mean, you have to work to see the human beings behind it. And if we start with the human beings behind it, with the thing that brings out those visceral reactions, it produces a very different result. I'll let you be the judge. So I put together this slide instead. And it's got some of the basic statistics. I told the governor, yeah, in a given year we have 55,000 families on TANF. We have 94,000 kids on TANF. But let me tell you this, Governor. Our vision, when we think about TANF, is a mom holding a child. Now, they're not all single parents. 10% of them are two-parent families. And they're not all moms, but pretty much overwhelmingly they are. And every single one of them has a child, or you wouldn't be on TANF at all. But our picture is not just of a mom holding a child. That mom's standing on an escalator that's taking her up to the top of a cliff. And at the end of 60 months, we're prohibited from helping that mother anymore, and she goes right off that cliff. And every year, 1,690 families go off that cliff. That's how many moms and families lose their benefits every year. So I said to the governor, everything we do within ESA, within the Economic Services Administration, within the TANF program, is focused on how do we help that family in those 60 months when we can help them to keep that mom from going off that cliff. And Governor, with the time we have to invest more in education. We have to invest more to get them through their barriers. And if we don't do that, the consequences are just too great. That is intended as an illustration of how much more compelling it is if you talk about why you do what you do than if you just go through the facts and figures overall. I'm going to go back here. Going to go back to something about us left-brain thinkers. The reason why I want you to watch that video is because what it says at the end of the day is us left-brain thinkers, us logical, organized, systematic people. What the video says is if you're going to be organized, logical, systematic, and look at the evidence is that the right side of your brain, the visceral reactions that we have, compel us to act. So basically, if we're left brain thinkers, we don't get the option of avoiding the right brain, of ignoring the right brain. We have to understand how the whole person thinks if we're going to persuade them overall, if we're going to compel greater action overall. So I really recommend that video to you, and like I say, it's in your homework list. Now I just want to take a minute and explain, okay, so if all this is true, you got this big, huge organization at DSHS, how do you spread this through the organization? So a little primer on DSHS. In one way, this is us. All these little letters represent our different organizations. So CA, Children's Administration, 2,735 employees. DDA, Developmental Disabilities Administration, 985 employees, if you don't count the institutions. These are the institutions. These are what we call residential habilitation centers. You can see their names and the number of this is just employees. Economic Services Administration, we've talked about them. Juvenile Justice and Rehabilitation Administration and their institutions. Financial Services Administration and Service and Enterprise Support Administration are the administrations that generally keep the trains running on time for DSHS overall. Less direct service, but things like our budgeting, our finance, our human relations, that kind of thing. Behavioral health and service integration, you can see they got 148 people in their shop, but check that out. At Western State Hospital, 1,737 people. Not people, employees. Most state agencies aren't that big. In fact, if you look at these agencies overall, probably 5 of them would be in the top 10 of all state agencies. And the smallest of them are bigger than the small cabinet agencies. And that's not even considering how much money they spend. Aging and Long-Term Support Administration, 1,481 employees, gets the prize for spending the most money, $3.6 billion every 2 years. And we're not getting any younger, so that's not getting any smaller. In total, you got 130 offices, 500 buildings. So the question becomes, how do you either disseminate the notion of the CEO matrix overall, or strategic plans overall, or get people more in touch with this idea of being focused on why we do what we do and what our mission is? And I conceptualize this like this. It's kind of like a pond. Poor DSHS folks in this room, because they've had to hear me say this for 2 years. I'm even tired of hearing myself say this. And yet I understand that whatever wave we start towards the center can take a long way to reach out. And moreover, when you talk about the institutions, they usually have a different relationship to your organization. Just like actually satellite office has a different relationship to your institution. You need to be cognizant of that, because you have to take extra efforts to get your message out to those organizations overall if you're going to have an impact there. And then if we're imagining a rock here that makes a big splash, and we also imagine right here, say, a bulwark of some kind, then obviously the wave's not going to move out at all. What that's intended to illustrate is you got to have your team on board. You've got to have your management team on board. If my assistant secretaries didn't believe the importance of mission, the importance of empowerment, it creates a whole dead zone within the organization. You cannot get home there. So you have to be cognizant of how your message spreads out, what you can work on overall. But this is still kind of challenging stuff, because we're trying to challenge ourselves to go beyond the relatively easy level, which is what are our strategic objectives, to better understanding not just mission and values, but some of the stuff we didn't talk about today, which is how do you make people feel seen and heard? How do you make them feel more empowered? How do you get them to bring their authentic self? How do you get that passion at work? How do you build trust? Because you have to do the whole picture if you want to get that, what I call that 10% bonus that's, I think, available to a great run organization. This is kind of the strategy that we've used overall. First of all, relentless with the cabinet of making them listen to me. And we work on stuff like, we went through Pete Carroll's book, One Forever. We're reading the Stephen Covey book on trust now. We spent a lot of time working on this. We've had a number of kind of off-site meetings. How do we increase empowerment and so forth and so on. Then with this group, down through here, something like 150 folks. This is our extended management team. We brought them all together a couple of times to also try to talk about this material. So Generally, when we meet as a management group, very little nuts and bolts, very little strategic objective discussion, very little going down the list, much more learning about how can we do a better job of feedback, why is being in touch with mission important, those kind of things. And then you start to get to the question, okay, that's cool, but what about all these key managers? I mean, these people take economic service administration since we've talked to them. So in here, maybe you have 3 regional administrators who are basically your conduit for maybe 2,800 or 900 people in the field. So what we decided is we need a way to at least get to all these people. And so what we've done is we've created a thing called the Excellence Wave. It's a series of multi-day seminars, about 4 days, where we work with the team to get them to whatever realization they want to get to about the importance of why, the importance of mission. A big part of this is also lean. And by the way, I would stop here and parenthetically say, if you don't know your mission, you cannot do lean. If you don't know why you do what you do, you can't define what waste is. Waste is determinative, doing the things that don't meet your mission. So you can't just skip to that. You've got to start with this. But we also teach them lean tools and so forth. And then we do follow-ups. And then we're also trying to meet at as many folks on the front line as possible. I go to a lot of offices. They have to listen to me too. It's a great thing about being in charge. And this is kind of how we're trying to change the way DSHS works overall. And now, for homework list for y'all, I really think this is super time well spent for you guys to, and most of these, other than one that's a book and a super easy read, these are typically like 18-minute TED Talk videos. I cannot tell you, again, we talked about Simon's on how great leaders inspire action. Super compelling, but more compelling, I think, for us left-brain folks, because it basically says you don't get to opt out of understanding the right side. You just, if you do, you're missing the boat. You're missing the ticket to an exceptional organization. This is wonderful. This Dan Pink TED Talk is basically looking at the social science of what motivates people. What motivates people to do a better job overall? And typically, what we find is it's not money. And kind of the same thing in the next video, what makes us feel good about our work? Both of those exceptional videos when you're trying to understand how to manage a team, because it's not all about money. And basically, if we're in state government, we're lucky it's not all about money, because that's not usually our strong suit. This one gets a little deeper here, this Brene Brown video. Super entertaining. Actually, all of them are entertaining. This goes to more of the issue of empowerment and the issue of authenticity and how you bring people in as a leader, as a manager, and really by opening the door to be more vulnerable, we connect better with people overall. It's the basis for building trust and building a trusting organization. Great video. And then this one's great too. This one on being wrong. I love how she talks about what's the difference between being wrong and being right. How do they feel different? And until someone tells you you're wrong or tell you know you're wrong, they don't feel different at all. Or in her illustration, it's like Roadrunner and Coyote, where the coyote follows the Roadrunner and off the side of the cliff, and it's all cool until the Roadrunner or the coyote realizes, wait a minute, I'm not a bird, there's nothing underneath me, and then they fall. What it speaks to is the importance of feedback, the critical importance of feedback if we're going to be better leaders overall. And then finally, this book on the speed of trust, really good stuff in there, quantifying how in trusting organizations you have increased shareholder value, increased productivity, and in the case of that book, some real good pointers on how you can build trust and how you lose trust. So pretty much, I'm at the end of the line, except for my favorite slide, which is this one. I've had it in every office I've ever had. Kind of got to figure it out. Got 2 spiders. They're going to catch that kid and eat like they've never eaten before. It's totally morbid and inappropriate, but it's just the idea of go big or go home. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions. And what I love about this crowd is when I'm talking to my team, I always have to say, just one rule, don't confuse me with someone who has money. Because when you go out to the team, they think, well, you're Secretary of DSHS. Surely you can fix this and this and this and this. And it's like, not really. I only have the money I can grovel for. So since I know you're not groveling for money from me, I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Or I'm happy to just let you go out to that beautiful day early. Anybody?
Would you be sending this link out to us?
Sure, we can. I'd be happy to do that.
If we can, we'll put it on the website, GDMA website.
Okay, then I'll just tell you one more thing about that first part, that Matrix movie. So there's this in that movie. There's a person, he's a hacker, and he thinks this Matrix thing's out there and life's all a fake, and hooks up with another guy, he's called Morpheus, who agrees that it's a fake, and in fact offers to show him what the real world is like. But he sets him up and says, okay, he has 2 pills in his hand. It's like a blue pill and a green pill. He says, okay, you take this blue pill, and you'll get to see what the Matrix is. But there'll be pain and suffering, and all I'm promising you is the truth. And if you take this green pill, you wake up in your bed tomorrow morning, and everything's the same, and this never happened. And the thought occurred to me, it's just like being interviewed for the governor for running DSHS. But I'll let you figure that one out. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.